So, hey, this is Tiger again. Welcome to my stream second try. Spectre says back again, Akura, let's go around 2. Well, I was just typing that the internet is down steadily now, and that we have to postpone our Desiro family reunion, but then all of a sudden it returned. Let's see how long it stays. If it cuts out again, I apologize in advance already, and then it should not be today. Yeah, did I already turn on my DLC markers properly? It looks like I did not turn on any. My disclaimer for telling you that I got the games and the DLCs and the game keys for free for being an ambassador from Dovetail games. I always repeat that, not because I have to, but because I like to. And we are in Leipzig Dresden, and what you see in front of you is a collection of all the Siemens Desiro trains that we have in the game so far, starting with Papa Desio Classic, the Baureihe 642 that we first saw in the Maintalbahn, and that is now almost on every German route. We will drive from one into Leipzig Hauptbahnhof soon. Then the British ones, the Desiro UK and the Desiro city trains, what Siemens calls now the Desiro Verve trains, the 380 from the ScotRail, and the Glasgow Edinburgh Express. Special local DLC for that one. I think it lives in Cathcart DLC. Then the 350 units that we go from Birmingham to Crewe, the latest DLC, starting with the 351 unit in London Midland livery, as we have already talked about, because they served in the beginning of their existence, or in case of the stroke 1 units, in the middle of their existence for London Midland. Now for most of them LNR, as it says here, the London North Western Railway. It has this green and white livery that we know already from the London Euston to Milton Keynes core route for Trains in World. What was it? 5 probably. Yeah, those 3 units. The middle one, the stroke 2 unit, here in the special livery of the British Transport Police 61016, as Lofty was to explain, because 101 is the police call number in parts of Britain, and 61016 in case something is not right and you want to tell the British Transport Police so that they can take care of. And also this one here, the Desiro City train from Thameslink, running on the southeastern high-speed line. The white ones with this very distinct whirring sound, also a Desiro train. So, line up, because we have already quite a number of those trains in the game, and they are very, very diverse. One diesel train, the Desiro Classic, then a lot of different electric trains for different systems, overhead catenary, some using third rail, different voltage numbers, and Spectre says 101 is also a nice Depeche Mode live album. Not sure if the police like it though. Oh, I guess the police like Depeche Mode a lot. So what I wanted to do is to drive one service into Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. The one that I picked first at random was a bad pick, because we already failed the service with some sort of signaling problem. Borsdorf, Sachsen to Leipzig. Let's try this one that comes from Dübeln. Döbeln Hauptbahnhof to Leipzig. Let's get the passengers on the train. Safety systems on, even if we are not going that far. PCB mode on is good. CIFA battery. Is there a switch for the PCB? No, we should be good. CIFA and PCB. That's all we need. On a German train we can even lock the doors, even though the light is still at red and we probably have to wait for a bit. Dispatcher could allow us to shunt to the signal, but for this distance it doesn't really make sense. Yeah, the Desiro Classic diesel train, we might want some headlights before we start anyway. What number do we have? LB 110, I see. This does not really fit here in the PIS indicator. And we are still held here at the signal, can't leave the pocket, can't leave the loop line. This part of the Leipzig Dresden DLC or core route is actually the one that we usually rush through with our ICE trains. Interesting car that they built here, with a lot of detail. So I thought I can actually shorten the time that we have to wait by picking a different service, but it seems like the Regionalbahn 101, and here is it again. No, it's not 101, it's 110. Serious car dashboard has more detail than train driving. Yeah, someone went wild here with this convertible. Guy will have problems starting his car though. Nah, probably it will give you the reading only after starting the engine or the ignition at any rate. Yeah, it's nice work, isn't it? There's a lot of detail if you look at those sheer curtains. At 294 passing by, and we are still at a red signal. Problem is that we have to cross through the tracks and go to our right hand track. This is apparently a bit of a problem that you have if you start at Borsdorf in Sachsen. Spectre says, when you are a car nerd but work for a train sim company. Yes, maybe in theory. I mean, you have this car and then electric pole floating in the air through pavement. Well, you gotta start somewhere. And then hope that the rest will follow suit. But yeah, the timetable planning here is something that can be improved. Those are waiting for a train going to Wurzen. I hope we don't have to wait for this train to Wurzen to pass by before we can start. Deutschbahn Simulator. This is why Ronnie is always complaining about the DB Infrago. Because how are you supposed to be on time if you can't start your journey? Because whatever train is in front of you. But this seems to be a general problem with this stop here, right? If you have to branch out to stop. Now there's a train passing through, and when green signal appear, there goes 2 hours. And for Spectre it is a track 3. Spectre, I read that they will close down the route from Cologne to Hagen for a few months in 2026. So Rhein-Ruhr Osten will probably disappear from the collection. And now we're green. And now we are green. It's not easy being green, but it is sometimes a relief to get a green signal. We can actually start with 80, what is quite steep for our train that can only go 120. At least this Wechselblinken cannot be missed. So even people who always forget about the starting program, like me, they won't forget on this train. So actually this train is nice to drive, but it seriously lacks power. So one more switch. Dodging all the yellows. We have to stop at Leipzig-Engelsdorf. That is where the big yard is and where the 294 lives. And have you already discovered that Vectron can automatically handle the starting program when IFB is turned on? I think I have, so it just does not accelerate beyond the 40, right? So, and accelerating from 80 to 120 on this train is like running up Mount Fuji. And even the 500 hertz. Oh. This I have not tried. So the AFB is also taking into account the safety systems limits. You can see that now Rapid Transit is in my repertoire on Steam as well. The silver trains, Silver Talent 2s. Are you training for Tadami? I am always training for everything. Let's see how the brakes work. I think they brake very properly. in the higher speed ranges, but as soon as you want to really stop the train, it gets difficult. So we are 6 minutes late already because we were not people. And now we have our premature end of the journey. But it looks nice in the rising sun. And you can watch the pattern of the exhaust smoke change with the load that we have and with the speed. So that is definitely something nice. CD Radar says, by the way, fun fact, one of my colleagues is moving to Germany and will be a U-Bahn driver in Nuremberg starting next year. Yeah! So he will be driving the Siemens, what are they called, the G1s. He will probably not drive the driverless versions. Diesel power, aspect, yeah, 4 chimneys under electric line. It's good for the electric line, is it not? Well, it's the only Desiro train that runs on diesel that we have in the game. So from my own experience, I don't think that I've ever been on a 642. In our region, they usually use the Alstom trains, the Linz 648 and the 622. Expected this driving driverless trains would be a nice job for him because it has not so much pressure. CD Radar, I like that you can see the RPM on the motor screen. Ah, yeah, that is true. Oh, I should have stopped long before. And even with 100% brakes, it takes forever for this train to come to a standstill. So the motor screen is set. Where do I find that? I don't know. I'm sometimes confused. That's the thing that I always liked on simulated locomotives, like on the Class 66. You can actually see the rotations, the RPMs. Well, obviously, the livery for the Westfrankenbahn doesn't really fit here into Leipzig Dresden. Sellerhausen is probably the last stop before we get to Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. Announcements? Not on this train, I don't think so. No announcements. I have to do the announcements myself. This is Leipzig-Sellerhausen. You don't want to end up in Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. This is your last chance to get off the train. At the moment we are exceedingly late. We should have been at Leipzig 3 minutes ago already. Please direct your complaints zu DB Infrago or the Bundesregierung. Or the fact that this train cannot really accelerate. Acura could be more bad than ending in Leipzig. Imagine ending in Bremen. I don't know. Saxophone. This is an instrument that is played a lot in Leipzig and Dresden. A saxophone. '80 is announced. We're not getting 1000 hertz because we are not faster than 95 at this point. So we can have the train coast. Now passing this largish area. Now we actually get 1000 hertz because 40 is announced. So what is so bad about Bremen? I don't think that I ever been at Bremen consciously. I might have passed through. Haha, yeah, where I ended up completely somewhere in the left, in the nettles with your comfort jet. The CD radar. Well, it must have been a nice journey to Meissen at any rate. So, But can you see it is actually running much smoother here running into Leipzig than it used to. And it looks great, this approach into Leipzig Hauptbahnhof, in my opinion. And what's really nice on this train is the panorama screen, right? You can really see a lot. And on the train it always sounds like you left the indicator on. Yeah, disregard the artifacts for the 294. Meissen is a beautiful town, the city radar. That is so. And it is a beautiful piece of track. Railway. So, on track 20 we arrive. Was not really necessary to be so slow. I have to admit I've never enjoyed this approach to Leipzig Hauptbahnhof as much as I did on this train here. The Desio Classic. And as soon as we're done with this service, we switch to the presentation and have a look on all the different variants of the Desiro train that I found in the net. And that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have safely arrived at Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. Safely, not necessarily on time, but well, if you are pressed for time, then you have to use a different means of transportation anyway. And Akura says, I don't think I ever saw a Desiro at Hamburg Hauptbahnhof. Probably not. But there might be some Desiro versions that can be spotted at Lübeck at any rate. What does Lübeck have to do with Hamburg? Well, because in Train Sim World, Hamburg-Lübeck is the route that I was thinking of, obviously. So, presentation time. Here is the presentation for the Siemens Desiro family. So, not really a lot of complicated stuff today, but it is more like sorting your model railway vehicles. And I am sorting the ones that we have in the game and put them into context. This is the train that we just rode on, the DB Baureihe 642, the Desiro Classic train. And if I put numbers here, so for years, then this is typically only for a bit of a orientation, so that we know where we are. Most likely it's the years that I found that those trains have been built for the first time, and sometimes they give you the year for when they entered service, so this may deviate a bit. That is a Desiro Classic that was actually sold a lot at the time in different countries, and I give you just a list of the ones that we have in the game with a picture, and the ones that we don't have in the game yet, but they also exist, or at least I have found mentioned somewhere on the net. I put them in grayish here. So in Slovenia, actually, they use trains of that kind since the year 2000 as G312 0 and 1. In Romania, they use this train. In Denmark, they use this train as the DSB MQ trains. In Hungary, they use the train since 2002, the Desiro Classic. In Austria as the Reihe 5022. In Greece, they used the version, a different version than in 2004. In Bulgaria, Bulgaria, they used the train since 2005, and even in the USA, they used this train on the Sprinter route in California as the Verbrennungstriebwagen 642, as the number that you can find mentioned there. They did not really get very happy with this train in the United States. I don't know that, I don't think that a lot of those units are still in use. They had two vehicle trains, married pairs, they like to call them. And funny enough, because those trains do not comply with the FRA regulations for proper trains, they are sometimes referred to as light rail vehicles, like trams or subway trains somewhere. So interesting enough, a couple of those trains live in the United States as diesel engines. There was some talk about using electric engines on the northeast, or electric trains of this kind on the northeast corridor, but I don't think that this ever really was a thing then. And then the latest version of the Desiro Classic that I have found documented was started in Bulgaria again with the BD-Z 30 and 31. Whereas the trains that we have in the game of the Desiro family are typically in Great Britain, and they started out with the series of the Desiro UK trains. And here there are the trains from the Birmingham Crew DLC, the 350/1 that we already had in the London Euston to Milton Keynes DLC, but still here in the London Midland livery. Here with LNR livery since 2008, the Stroke 2 variant, and since 2014 the Stroke 3 variant. So those three trains is a bit so the heart of the whole idea, because it is in the Birmingham Crew DLC, and they center a lot on these trains. So I want to put them into context. They are not the first Desiro trains to run in Britain. Since 2002 there is the Class 360/1, and then there are two electric versions, the Class 444 and the 450, since the year 2002 of this kind, actually quite a lot of units. Then there is a Class 185 diesel train since 2005 on the north, on the Transpennine Express. Class 360/2 since 2005, and this is a train, as far as I know, only 5 units were ever built and put into use, but they were more like the precursor for a train that was then sold to Thailand, and they are working at a Bangkok rail link for the, what is it, Thai train operating company of Thailand. Inspector says, just take a bunch of totally different trains and call them Desiro, just like Toyota did with the Corolla for decades, isn't it? Well, something must be actually quite the same. So like the frames or the chassis, obviously for British trains you always need to rework the chassis for making it fit with a loading gauge, right? But in Thailand they could they had use for those trains, and so they live in Thailand, and this is the only documented export version of the Desiro UK into a different country. The Class 380 actually looks not so much different if you look at the cars and the doors and the windows a bit at any rate, but with a totally different face here, with this tilted face. The 350/4 also exists, but not in Birmingham Crew, but it was originally built for the Northern Transpennine Express, but it does not work there anymore. The Class 700 that we've looked at, that lives in the Southeastern High Speed DLC, is run by Thameslink, and this is a different line. If you listen to what Siemens tells you, it is called the Desiro City No longer Desiro UK, but Desiro City is the newer version starting in 2014. And there is the Class 707, what is also a Desiro City one, working for Southeastern. And if you think back on this one video when I checked out all the stations between Chatham and London St Pancras, there was one picture of the 707 for Southeastern that I encountered at Gravesend, if I remember correctly. And the Class 717 also exists, also run by, not really Thames Link as a brand, but the same TOC, Go Via Thames Link, for the Great Northern lines. So those are the different versions of the Desiro trains running in Great Britain that I have found documented somewhere. There are some sub classes for the 380 and also for the 450. I think I've not documented them as subclasses. Typically they only are different for the number of cars that they sport in the train. And since 2025 or something, Siemens now markets the Desiro UKs and Desiro City trains as Desiro Verve together in one batch, more or less. So if you come across this train, Desiro Verve, it's not really something different. It is still the train for the British loading gauge. Again, Spectre, as you said, totally different trains. Desiro mainline trains, ML trains, built as the Baureihe 460. I don't think that the Deutsche Bahn never used those trains. They were run by different Eisenbahnverkehrsunternehmen since 2007, and the Belgians actually bought a lot of those Desiro mainline trains. Mainline because I don't know why it is called mainline, but the feature that those trains were marketed with is that they have this low floor exit entrance, what was something new at the time. And the Belgians actually bought a lot of those units as the AM08 for the Belgian state train operating company. And also a version for the Russian market was built out of this line in 2011, also produced in Russia after a time, the broad gauge version. So there is actually a Desiro broad gauge version, and it is called the Lastochka, as you can read here. What if I can trust the translating programs on the internet, is a little swallow, a Lastochka, ein Schwälbchen. So a broad gauge Desiro train also exists, and they are apparently they are still operating in Russia. More or less the abode that these trains found was Austria then, since 2015. In Austria they are building those trains first as the Reihe 4746, then 4744. And they also used it on this one line that runs from Austria to Hungary and back again with the same numbers. And since 2016, Siemens more or less declared that the Siemens Mireo train, what is the Baureihe 463, I guess now, is the successor of the Desiro mainline trains. So if you stumble into a Siemens Mireo train, then you know this is actually the daughter train, or whatever, the successor train for the Desiro mainline train. Why they opened up a new line with those, I don't know, but the Mireo is obviously the train that Siemens markets primarily nowadays for this typical low to mid-range spectrum for commuter trains. And this is where they do all the funny stuff with fuel cell drive and battery driven trains and stuff that is happening now in the Mireo. line. Nevertheless, in 2019, the Ostdeutsche Eisenbahngesellschaft, which is a train operating company in Germany, in the eastern part of Germany, bought a bunch of those Austrian-built trains of the Desiro main line, and this is why they also inherited this number that is used in Austria, the 47, 46, at least from what you can read. I've never seen a train of that of that kind in real life, but apparently they exist. And then in 2022, even the ÖBB opened a new Reihe, 4748, what is probably the latest child in the Desiro ML line that did not, swap over into the Mireo line, but stayed in the Desiro line. Desiro double-decker trains were around since 1989 with the Baureihe 445, the Meridian. That is only a prototype though. And CD Radar says, my all-time favorite. So what is your all-time favorite? With the delay between the comments and the chat, I have to ask again. Back to the ÖBB 47XX. Oh, interesting. I actually have never seen a train of that kind in real life. But it's great that you know them and that it is your all-time favorite. The Meridian did not get a chance to become someone's all-time favorite because it was disassembled after it got the certification as a prototype, but then it was never built as a train for in use. And then the double-deck program was picked up in 2005 with trains for the Swiss market. So SBB, the Swiss train operating company, bought quite a big bunch of those sets as RABE 514 trains. Apparently still run around in Switzerland. Then the double-decker program in the Desiro line more or less ended until it was kind of reinvented in the Desiro high capacity HC trains, what are trains that are marketed in the German market a lot since 2018 with different sub versions. And in Germany they don't get the stroke 1, stroke 2 or whatever number, but they get a fourth number in front of it. So the 462 units are typically the O 462, 1 462, 2 462, 3 462. And since 2024 in Northern Bavaria, we have a lot of those 462 trains, where it's I think the 6-car version of the Desiro high capacity. The Desiro high capacity train was asked for a lot by the community, and many hope that in Trains in World 6 we will get the Desiro high capacity. It is a great train to run, to ride on. It is super convenient. It is silent. It is more or less reliable from what you can hear. Well, a version of this train was sold to Israel in 2019, where it apparently still works. Can't find a lot of information about it, but well, maybe if my Hebrew was better I could find something about it. And it is supposed to be sold to Egypt in 2027. And yeah, this week all over the news that the SBB, the Swiss train operating company, is buying more Siemens trains, double-decker trains for commuter lines, but it didn't say what kind of trains they were actually buying. At least when I checked the news, they just had a picture of a double-decker train that was more or less a Stadler-Kiss. So I don't know what trains that will be, and they are supposed to operate in starting in 2030 or the 2030. So it will be interesting what kind of trains that will be. Maybe something out of this line. Don't know. Maybe if it is a different Mireo line or a whole new line altogether. So I'm not so super deep into all that, but interesting. But still, I find it quite nice to see how many different versions of trains exist under the same roof, called the Desiro family. And we have, depends how many different versions you call as a single standing train, I think at least 5 different British Desiro trains and the one Desio Classic in Germany we have in the game and can enjoy there. If you drive the different British versions, you can actually see some similarities in the layout of the screen and stuff. The Desiro City looks different, but the Class 8 system shares a lot of features with the 350. Even from the exterior, you cannot really judge that. So what else did I try to find out about those different trains? Yeah, I tried to find out what kind of a power supply they use, and interesting to see is that the Desiro Classic started out mainly as a diesel multiple unit, and most of the units that were sold in foreign countries also were diesel units, but some of them are actually electric units, and the one that went to Slovenia, from what you can read on the internet, are actually electric units. This one, the 460 that went to Greece, so Greece has a diesel unit and an electric unit of a kind, and the one that went to Bulgaria starting in 2017, so Bulgaria also has a diesel and an electric version of that. Whereas in Great Britain, most of the Desiros are electric trains, with the exception of the Class 185, where it's a diesel-driven Desiro train. You can see it in the numbers. The one typically tells you that it is a diesel train, whereas the 3 at the beginning or the 7 at the beginning is an electric train. And those here, the 444 and the 450, are third rail trains with a different voltage even. The 707 also is a third rail only train. And those units here, the 350 stroke 1, not the stroke 2 or the stroke 3, can do both. They can get the overhead catenary, or they can get the choose from the third rail, as can the Class 700. And this is what we tried in one of the videos. Also the 717 can do both. So most of it electric, some third rail, mostly overhead catenary, and one DMU actually. Whereas here on this side, the Desiro mainline, double decker and high capacity, to my knowledge, they are all overhead catenary electric trains. That is that one. And for the British ones, because they have so many in the game of them, I try to find out what train operating company is owning them at the moment and how many of them exist in real life. And well, start with the obvious. The Class 38 is operated by ScotRail, and apparently there are 38 units of that kind. The Class 185, you remember the one that is diesel driven, is working for the Transpennine Express, what is nowadays a standalone train operating company with 51 units, so quite a lot. The Class 360 stroke 1 is operated by the East Midlands Railways, the EMR. Formerly everyone's belonged or was operated, I have to say, for the first Great Eastern and Greater Anglia, somewhere in the eastern part of the Midlands in the UK. And if I say operated, typically after privatization, trains do not belong to the train operating company, but they typically belong to a company that leases the trains to the train operating companies. So they typically belong to Angel Trains or Porterbrook or whatever those companies are called. But the names that I give you here is who operates them. And East Midlands Railways operates the 360. There are only 21 around. The 360 stroke 2. Yeah, if you look who they are operated by, you find this global center of rail excellence, which is some kind of a testing entity, and so they are as you can read, most probably used for testing. In former times, in the beginning, they served for the Heathrow Express, Heathrow Connect. They worked for TfL Rail, which is more or less the predecessor to the Elizabeth line. And then the Rail Operations Group that we know in the game from the Class 370 version that operates for the Rail Operations Group. And there are only ever built like 5 units, and 2 of them have already been scrapped, so there are not many around of them. The 444 and the 450s are operated by Southwestern Railway, formerly Southwest Trains, and there are quite a lot, around 45 for the 444 and 127 for the 450, so that is a significant number of train sets. In our 350s that we know from the Birmingham crew, they are operated by West Midlands Trains, and West Midlands Trains is the operating company, and they have more or less 2 brands that they are running, and this is the West Midland Railways and the London North Western Railways, not the North Eastern as I said, it's London North Western Railways. Not to be confused with the LNER, what the eastern part would be. In former times, the 350/1 units worked for Central Trains and Silverlinks, and this was the time when they had this grey-bluish unbranded livery. Then they worked for London Midland. This is where they got this light green, white, and even lighter green livery, and these very loud light green seats in the interior. A couple of them were subleased to Southern at the time, whereas the Stroke 2 and Stroke 3 units worked for London Midlands, and then afterwards now they are all operated by West Midlands Trains. Also, the 350/4 are now operated by West Midlands Trains, if they are operated at all. They were built first for the Transpennine Express, but they are not working there anymore. And there are only like 10 units, 30 for the Stroke 1, 37 for the Stroke 2. A couple of them are actually stored away because they cannot be used, at least from what you can read on the net. Stroke 3, only 10 of them exist. The 700s, we have already discussed this work for the train operating company Govia. Thameslink Railway is a train operating company that has like 4 brands that it is operating, and Thameslink is one of the brands, and there are a lot of them, 115. The 717 also for Govia, Thameslink Railways, but for the Great Northern. Sub-brand, and next year in 2026, Govia, Thameslink Railway, and I think also the West Midlands Trains will stop operating, and they will as independent private train operating companies, and they will more or less carry over into state-run train operating companies to prepare for the Great British Railway to collect all the leases together. So an interesting process actually, this renationalization of the rail system, with more and more state-run companies picking up all the leases and picking up the train sets again. Well, not really, because they still belong to Angel Trains and Porterbrook and whoever they are, but then they will be operated. How this works then, if they just wait and buy new trains by Great British Railways, or if they buy them, the existing trains, off the leasing companies, or whether they are still leasing them, I don't know. Will be an interesting thing to see how this develops. The 707 Southeastern, and not the Southeastern as a private train operating company, but the operator of last resort that works for the Department for Transport. Before that, they worked for Southwestern Railways also. That has now the 444 and 450s. Yeah, well, I think this is what I found out about the Siemens Desiro trains family and why we have so many different versions of them in the game. And CD Radar says, haha, yeah, back then when CD Radar was just a fictive parody company, we used those 2019 Mirios as our new trains. I see. So the Mirio is obviously a train that is not in the Trains in World game so far. Still has to arrive there. Yeah, well, I found it quite interesting actually to see how trains more or less travel, not only on the tracks, but also through different train operating companies. And between different countries. Let's see if we find a nice service that we can run on a route that we have not used a lot. I have to change the DLC marker for that if I find my stuff again. Here we are, DLC. We would now need Edinburgh, Glasgow route. It's a long name, isn't it? And I can go back to the game. You can see here the screen looks a bit like the one that we have in the 350 units. Also the way that the isolation switches for the safety systems are aligned looks a bit familiar. No image expected here. Where is my light switch here? Yeah, and we're starting here at Croy and running into Glasgow Queen Street. Spectre says Edinburgh to Glasgow. We are still in the 100. And Acura says the Desiro seems to be a little bit like what Stellantis is to below 7.5 tons transporter vans on the on-road. Yeah, maybe. This is not my field of expertise, unfortunately. At any rate, it is a quite versatile platform. And I can only repeat the Siemens Desiro HC, the high capacity trains, are super comfy trains. but they don't have a lot to do with the 700, the class 700 units, or this class 380 unit, or the Baureihe 642 that we used in the first service this evening. We stop at Lenzi. Inspector says the ones with the highly disciplined drivers who never try to kill you to gain 5 meters of road. And Akura says exactly them. True Zen masters who know that to be fast you have to be slow. Okay. Another reason to travel by train and not by car.